was a Friday night, and I had just finished dinner with a group of friends downtown. We laughed and talked for hours, but as the night dragged on, I decided it was time to head home. The streets were quiet, and the cool breeze carried a sense of calmness. I called for an Uber, relieved when it arrived in just a few minutes. The driver, a man in his late 40s, had a slight grin as he greeted me. "For Sarah?" he asked, his voice low but polite. "Yes," I confirmed, sliding into the back seat. The drive started out uneventful. He didn't talk much, which was fine by me. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, but something about him felt odd. He kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes lingering just a little too long. "You live far out," he said casually, breaking the silence. "Not too far," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The air in the car felt heavy, and my instincts started screaming at me. I gripped my phone tightly, pretending to text someone, just in case. When we pulled up in front of my apartment, I mumbled a quick "thank you" and got out. But as I walked toward the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Turning around, I saw his car still parked at the curb. The window rolled down slightly, and he gave me a small wave before driving off. I shook my head, trying to brush off the unease. Maybe he was just being polite. Still, I locked the door the moment I stepped inside and double-checked the windows. The warmth of the shower helped me relax, washing away the tension from the night. The steam filled the bathroom, fogging up the mirror. I turned off the water and wrapped myself in a towel, feeling a bit more at ease. But as I stepped into the hallway, I froze. The faint sound of a creaking floorboard echoed through the apartment. I lived alone. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. No response. My heart pounded as I tiptoed toward the living room. The lights were still off, but I could feel someone's presence. That's when I saw him, the Uber driver, standing in the shadows near the corner of the room, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. How did you get in?" I stammered, my throat dry. He stepped closer, a sick smile spreading across his face. "You forgot to lock one of the windows," he said casually, as if this were normal. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. You look so lonely tonight." My blood turned cold. I backed away, clutching the towel tightly around me, but he advanced slowly, blocking my path. "Please, just leave," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "You don't have to be scared," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I'll take good care of you." He lunged forward and I screamed, dodging him by inches. I ran toward the kitchen, hoping to grab a knife or anything to defend myself, but he was faster. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice, and slammed me against the wall. "Don't fight me," he hissed, pinning me in place. Just as I thought it was over, the front door burst open. "Sarah, you home?" a familiar voice called out. It was my best friend, Lily. She had a spare key and often dropped by unannounced. "Help!" I screamed, using every ounce of strength to shove the man away. Lily stepped into the living room, her eyes widening in horror as she saw the scene unfolding. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. The man panicked, glancing between us in the door. "You stupid little..." he growled, but before he could finish, Lily grabbed a heavy vase from the shelf and hurled it at him. It shattered against his shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. "You better run," Lily shouted, standing her ground. The man cursed under his breath and bolted out the door, just as sirens echoed in the distance. The police arrived minutes later, taking my statement and searching the area. They assured me they'd do everything they could to catch him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards felt like him coming back. But I knew one thing for sure. If Lily hadn't shown up when she did, I might not have lived to tell this story. It was late, and the city felt different at night. Quieter, darker, and almost predatory. I had stayed out too long with friends, and now I was exhausted, just wanting to get home. The streets were almost empty, the usual hum of traffic replaced by the distant sound of sirens and the occasional bark of a stray dog. I opened the Uber app, booked a ride, and waited on the corner for my driver. It didn't take long for a black sedan to pull up. The license plate matched the one on the app, and the driver rolled down his window with a polite smile. "For Mia?" he asked. Yes, that's me, I replied, relieved that he'd arrived so quickly. I climbed into the back seat, tossing my bag next to me, and buckled my seatbelt. The interior smelled faintly of air freshener, citrusy, almost masking something else I couldn't place. At first, everything seemed normal. He made small talk as we drove through the quiet streets. "Long night?" he asked, his tone friendly but a little off, like he was trying too hard. "Yeah, just catching up with friends," I replied, trying to sound casual. But something wasn't right. He missed a turn the app clearly showed. I think you missed the turn," I said, leaning forward slightly. "Oh, I know a shortcut," he replied smoothly, his eyes flicking to mine in the rearview mirror. My stomach nodded. Something about the way he said it, so calm and certain, set off alarms in my head. "Could you just follow the route on the app?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my attempt to stay composed. He didn't answer. Instead, he kept driving, turning onto a narrow, dimly lit road. The streetlights became sparse and the buildings gave way to empty lots and warehouses. "Excuse me? Where are we going?" I demanded, louder this time, my heart pounding. His smile vanished. "Relax. We're almost there," he said coldly, his voice now devoid of the earlier friendliness. Panic set in. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but he noticed. In one swift motion, he reached back and grabbed my phone out of my hand. "Hey!" I yelled, adrenaline surging. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, his tone icy. I scanned the car, my mind racing. The child locks were on. I couldn't open the doors from the inside. My hands trembled as I looked for something, anything I could use as a weapon. My bag was too far to reach, but then I saw a metal water bottle on the floor near my feet. He took another turn, this one leading onto a deserted road surrounded by thick trees. My chest felt tight, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. "Let me out!" I screamed, slamming my fists against the window. He didn't respond. He just kept driving, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. I knew I had to act fast. Grabbing the water bottle, I leaned forward and swung it as hard as I could at his head. The sound of the impact was sickening, and he let out a grunt of pain, swerving the car violently. "Stupid girl!" he shouted, trying to regain control of the wheel. I didn't stop. I swung the bottle again, this time hitting his shoulder. The car jerked to the side of the road and he slammed on the brakes. Before he could recover, I unlocked my seatbelt and lunged for the lock switch on the driver's door. My fingers fumbled, but I managed to unlock the doors just as he grabbed my arm. His grip was like a vice, and I screamed, thrashing and kicking with everything I had. Somehow, I broke free. I threw the door open and ran as fast as I could into the darkness. My lungs burned, my legs felt like they would give out, but I didn't stop. I could hear him shouting behind me, his footsteps pounding against the gravel as he chased me. I spotted a faint light in the distance, a gas station, my last shred of hope. I pushed myself harder, tears streaming down my face, my body screaming in protest. "Help! Please help!" I screamed as I burst through the gas station doors, startling the clerk behind the counter. The man chasing me stopped outside, his face shadowed by the streetlight. He stared at me for a moment, then turned and ran back to the car. Tires screeched as he sped off into the night. The clerk called the police, and when they arrived, I gave them everything I could remember about him and the car. They told me stories of other women who had gone missing in similar circumstances. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he planned to do. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see his face in the rearview mirror, that cold, calculating smile, and I'll never, ever take another rideshare alone at night. It was almost midnight when I finally left my friend's apartment. The city had grown quiet, the once busy streets now dimly lit and eerily deserted. I ordered an Uber as usual, comforted by the idea that I'd be home in less than 20 minutes. The app pinged, and I saw the car's details. A gray sedan with a license plate ending in 782. It pulled up in front of me almost instantly, the driver's face obscured by the shadows inside the car. He rolled down the window slightly and gave a nod. "For Emily?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "Yes," I replied, opening the door and sliding into the back seat. The car smelled faintly of something sweet, too sweet. It reminded me of cheap air fresheners, the kind that tried too hard to mask other odors. The ride began like any other. He didn't speak much, which I preferred, but something felt off. The way he gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white, and the occasional glance he threw back at me through the rearview mirror made my stomach churn. "Is everything okay?" I asked hesitantly when he missed a turn. "Just taking a faster route," he replied curtly, his tone clipped and emotionless. I didn't like this. My eyes darted to my phone to check the map, but before I could open it, he reached up and pressed a button on the dashboard. Suddenly, a faint hissing noise filled the car. "What's that?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "Relax," he said, his lips curling into a twisted smile. "Just the air conditioning." But it wasn't just air. My throat started to itch, and my head grew heavy. The sickly sweet smell in the car intensified, and my vision blurred. "Wait, what's happening?" I slurred, my body growing weaker by the second. I tried to unbuckle my seatbelt, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. My limbs felt like they were weighed down with lead, and the world around me started spinning. "Don't fight it," he said calmly, glancing back at me with dark, soulless eyes. "You'll be fine if you behave." I wanted to scream, to kick, to fight, but my body betrayed me. My head lolled to the side, and the last thing I remembered before everything went black was the sound of his laughter. A low, guttural chuckle that sent chills down my spine. When I woke up, the world was dark and cold. My head throbbed and my mouth was dry. I was lying on the back seat of the car, my hands bound with duct tape. The windows were fogged up and the faint glow of a streetlight outside barely illuminated the interior. "Finally awake," his voice came from the front seat. He turned to look at me, his face twisted in a grin that made my stomach turn. "Please, let me go," I whispered, my voice cracking. He ignored me, stepping out of the car and opening the back door. I tried to squirm away, but he grabbed my ankles and yanked me toward him with terrifying ease. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he growled, dragging me out of the car. We were in an abandoned parking lot, surrounded by nothing but silence and darkness. There was no one around, no one to hear me scream. As he leaned over me, his foul breath hot against my face, I felt a surge of desperation. My mind raced, searching for anything I could use to defend myself. That's when I saw it, a broken glass bottle lying a few feet away. He was too focused on pinning me down to notice as I twisted my wrist, ignoring the pain as the duct tape bit into my skin. My fingers brushed against the sharp edge of the glass, and I gripped it tightly. Just as he leaned in closer, I swung the shard with all my strength, slashing it across his face. He screamed in agony, clutching at his bleeding cheek. I didn't wait for him to recover. Fueled by pure adrenaline, I kicked him as hard as I could, sending him stumbling backward. I scrambled to my feet, ripping the tape from my wrists, and ran. My legs felt like they would give out, but I pushed forward, ignoring the sharp pain in my lungs. In the distance, I saw the faint glow of headlights. A car was approaching. I ran into the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically. The car screeched to a stop, and the driver, a woman, jumped out. "Are you okay?" "What happened?" she asked, her eyes wide with shock. "Call the police," I gasped, collapsing onto the ground. She did, and within minutes the authorities arrived. They searched the parking lot but found nothing. The man and his car had vanished. To this day, I don't know how I managed to escape, but I'll never forget the look in his eyes, the way he seemed to enjoy my fear, and I'll never trust a rideshare again.